He wasn't looking for God. He wasn't searching for truth. He wasn't questioning Rome. He was doing his job, and his job was death. On a hill outside Jerusalem, a Roman centurion stood watch over the crucifixion of Jesus. He had seen this before, hundreds of times, most likely. Broken men, screaming men, men who begged, men who cursed the gods with their last breath. Crucifixion was Rome's specialty, and yet this death stopped him. At the very moment Jesus breathed his last, the centurion said words that still echo through history. Truly, this was the Son of God, and those words changed everything. Let's begin with who this man was. A centurion wasn't a grunt soldier. He was a professional officer, disciplined, hardened, trusted with authority, responsible for order, execution, and outcome. If anyone on that hill knew how death usually looked, it was him. Which is why his reaction matters. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't religious. He wasn't sympathetic. He was Rome's representative at the cross. And when that man speaks, the Gospels want you to listen. All four Gospels describe Jesus' death, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke all pause to show us the centurion's response. Mark tells us something specific. It says, the centurion saw how Jesus died. Not just that he died, but how. Jesus didn't fade away. He didn't whimper. He didn't lose control. He cried out with a loud voice. And then he yielded his spirit. In other words, Jesus didn't have his life taken from him. He gave it. And the man trained to recognize power recognized it at the moment of apparent weakness. The centurion had seen criminals claw for breath. He had heard curses. He had watched men break. But Jesus prayed. Jesus forgave. Jesus entrusted himself to God. Luke records Jesus' final words as a prayer from Psalm 31. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And Luke tells us that after hearing this, the centurion praised God. That detail matters. This isn't mockery. This isn't sarcasm. This is worship language. The executioner responds the way Scripture says humans respond when they glimpse God's righteousness. This is where people often get confused. Some ask, did the centurion really understand what Son of God meant? Short answer, probably not in the way later Christians would articulate it. In Roman culture, Son of God language could mean someone favored by the divine, a remarkable man, a righteous one. But here's the key. The Gospel writers are not confused about what it means. Mark opens his entire Gospel with this declaration: the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And at the end, at the cross, a Roman centurion becomes the first human in Mark's Gospel to say it plainly. Not Peter, not the disciples, not the religious leaders, a Gentile executioner. Sometimes people speak greater truth than they realize, and sometimes God places the clearest confession in the mouth of the least expected witness. Matthew tells us that when the centurion saw the earthquake, the darkness, and everything that happened, he was filled with fear. This isn't cowardice. This is biblical fear. The kind of fear people feel when they realize they're standing on holy ground. Luke, meanwhile, records the centurion saying, "Certainly, this man was righteous." That word, righteous, is not small. It's the word Scripture uses for someone in right standing with God. Luke is showing us something powerful. Jesus didn't just die unjustly. He died as the righteous one. And the man tasked with killing him publicly declares his innocence before heaven. Up to this point, The soldiers mock Jesus. They beat him. They dress him in purple. They crown him with thorns. They gamble for his clothes. But by the end, the mocking stops. Something happens at the cross that strips away bravado. Darkness falls. The earth shakes. The veil in the temple tears. And the centurion, who started the day enforcing Rome's power, ends it confessing God's truth. The cross doesn't just judge sinners, it reveals hearts. Think about how shocking this is. Rome crucified Jesus to show he was powerless, but at the cross, Rome's representative declares him righteous. A Roman officer declares him God's son. And the cross, meant to silence, becomes a pulpit. The religious leaders mock, the disciples flee, but the executioner sees. This is not an accident. The Gospels are making a theological statement. The truth about Jesus does not come from proximity or position. It comes from revelation. The Bible doesn't follow him home. It doesn't tell us his next steps, and that's intentional. Because the point isn't to turn him into a legend. Later traditions would give him a name, Longinus, and tell stories about his conversion. But Scripture stays silent. Why? Because the focus isn't on what he did next. The focus is on what the cross did to him. It forced a confession. It broke through training, culture, authority, and habit. It made a hardened man speak truth he couldn't unsee. This centurion represents something deeply uncomfortable and deeply hopeful. He represents people who didn't grow up religious, people who enforced systems, people who were part of harm, people who thought they were just doing their job. And yet, when confronted with Jesus, something cracks open. If God can reveal his Son to a Roman executioner at the cross, he can reach anyone. No past is too hard. No role is too far. No heart is too disciplined to be undone by truth. The cross still exposes. The cross still reveals. The cross still forces a decision. Some mock, some turn away, some stay silent, and some, unexpectedly, speak truth. The centurion didn't understand everything, but he understood enough to say, "This man is not what we thought." And that's how faith often begins. Not with full clarity, but with honest recognition. The centurion stood closer to Jesus' death than almost anyone. And when he looked at the cross, he didn't see failure. He saw righteousness. He saw authority. He saw something divine. So here's the question the story leaves hanging. When you look at the cross, what do you see? A tragedy, a symbol, a religious idea? Or do you see the Son of God, crucified, righteous, and offering himself freely? Because the cross still speaks, and it still invites a response. Let's end in a short prayer. Jesus, you were judged innocent by the man ordered to kill you. You were confessed as God's Son at the moment you appeared weakest. Teach us to see what the centurion saw, not just how you died, but who you are. And may the cross still break through hardened hearts, including ours. Amen.